gentlemen, welcome to what should be the first of many Star Citizen episodes here on my channel. I want to start this series off a little bit different than probably most series I start off. There will be plenty of gameplay throughs and discussion about this, that, and the other thing in terms of the various modules, but I want to kind of start off as a kind of introductory episode about who I am and why I decided to pledge for Star Citizen. So, by trade, I'm a visual effects artist, and what that means is that for the last 14 and a half years, I've been deeply involved in various productions. Probably most notably that anyone would care about would be Battlestar Galactica. I was a freelance modeler on the miniseries, but I was also a full-time artist on Battlestar Galactica Blood and Chrome. And you've seen my work throughout the entire 4-season run because I built the prison ship and did a bunch of work on a bunch of the other ships. So, you know, I know spaceships fairly well. It's kind of been the hallmark of my career. But also, I do have a little bit of fairly recent game development, including some insight into why CryEngine 3 is a pain in the neck. I don't want to talk too badly about it, because it is actually a fine game engine, but the various issues we had with it at the company I worked for, granted I was not on that team, I was on the Unreal Engine 3 team, but it did give me some good insight onto some of the issues maybe CIG is having with developing Star Citizen. Let's kind of go back to why I decided to pledge for Star Citizen. My interest in this genre obviously goes back to Star Wars. I first saw Return of the Jedi in the theater when I was almost 3 years old. It was for my brother's, I think, 5th birthday party. And so it was probably about 4 or so months before my my 3rd birthday. So I still, to this day, distinctly remember sitting in the theater, watching Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader duke it out at the end of the movie. I don't really remember a ton, obviously. I mean, it's like not even 3 years old, so it's pretty hazy. But I do distinctly remember seeing the lightsaber battle at the end, and I was both probably terrified and enthralled by the imagery. So move forward, I don't know, a dozen years maybe, and I was in I think it was a Staples. I honestly have a poor memory when it comes to names, but I think it was in a Staples. And of course, you know, back, you know, this is probably 94, 95, so I was like 14, 15 years old. And I remember seeing, you know, how they had the computers out on the floor, and they were on, and you could go into them, or, you know, sometimes, you know, employees at the store would play games and whatnot. And of course, as a kid, you know, that was, you know, what I always wanted to see was, you know, what games were on the machines. And so one day I walk in there, and then there's this game. It was Star Wars, and you were flying around, and you were in a TIE fighter, and you're shooting X-Wings and Star Destroyers, and, you know, all the cool stuff that you always wanted to be able to do in real life, but also in a Star Wars game, at least at that time. You know, that was the thing that I really enjoyed the most from the series was of course the spacey stuff. That is what got me hooked. And it's what defined a large part of my career. So, you know, when I finally got, I think it was a Pentium 166, when I finally got a computer that could run the game, obviously that was possibly the first game I got. It was like that, Warcraft 2 and MechWarrior 2. And so for a long time, those were the games that I was playing, both with my friends or, you know, just by myself. And I played the hell out of that game. It got to the point where I so desperately wanted a sequel, and I, in my head, had you know, kind of developed, you know, just all the different things visually in my head that I wanted, and you know, the only way I can describe it at the time, it was kind of like a GTA in space. And so, of course, I've been thinking about this my entire life. So, obviously, the design is very complex. And unfortunately, something that would be too complex for one man to ever design. Now, I'm not a programmer either. But when StarCraft 2 came out, huge StarCraft fan, but when StarCraft 2 came out, and they had those in-engine cutscenes that I felt were controversial. I don't know if the general public thought they were as controversial as I did, but I was very disappointed that Blizzard wasn't doing the full cinematic treatment on all the cutscenes, and especially because the ones that they did were so awesome. But it got me thinking, because at the time I was working for a friend of mine, a guy named Ron Thornton. Now, if any of you are super sci-fi nerds, you would know that Ron Thornton is the guy who did a lot of the design, and he was the visual effects supervisor for the show Babylon 5, or at least for the first, 3 seasons of it. And another thing that if you're super nerdy and you follow visual effects type stuff, you'll know that he owned a company called Foundation Imaging, and that they were also 50% responsible for a television show called Starship Troopers Roughnecks Chronicles. That show was an all-CG, if you don't know. It was an all-CG kind of kid show take on the novel Starship Troopers. Was not based on the movie all that much, although they did borrow stuff like Dizzy being a girl and having at all any part in the story, because if you read the book, you know that Dizzy died in the first chapter, and it was like off camera, or what I'd call off camera. Rico found his body and whatnot. But that got me thinking that a game engine could do that kind of show at least as well as they did, if not better, because obviously Blizzard's artwork is such that it's top notch. And so when you saw the kind of cutscene stuff that they did in engine, you go, yeah, you could do a better show with a game engine. And because you're not necessarily needing it to be real time, characters can look a little bit better. You have less faceting and whatnot. And of course, technology has progressed since then that you really can do it without any faceting whatsoever. Because you're not trying to hit like the performance spec of a moderate gaming machine, or even a console, which is worse. So I started looking into game engines and gaming technology, and eventually found myself at a job several years later. This was after I worked on both Blood and Chrome and Defiance, and that TIE Fighter game that I'd always been wanting to develop was definitely percolating in my head. Obviously, at this point, I was starting to understand just how much of a challenge that would be. Granted, because it would be, not the physics-driven version that Chris Roberts is doing. It would be easier than Star Citizen, but only just. So, anyway, I was probably checking Facebook or something, and someone had posted a link to the Star Citizen Kickstarter. And lo and behold, there is the game that I was, wanting to design for TIE Fighter right there in front of me. And obviously, in theory it was there, but he was definitely on the same page as me of the different stuff that I wanted to do. I wanted to have that open world nature of the game. I wanted it to be a game that you weren't just flying around in spaceships, but you were taking part in boarding operations, both Star Destroyers and space stations, setting up your own kind of little pocket empire, and having to deal with the economic factors of that. Obviously, they'd be generating missions and whatnot, and you could travel between various locations, to defend supply convoys, or fight pirates, or if you picked you wanted to fight against the Empire, you wanted to fight against the Rebellion, or kind of going your own way and fight both for supremacy, at least in that area. That was the idea, and still to this day I want to do it, but I just know it's a pipe dream. But here was this guy speaking exactly the same language that I was speaking in my head, and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked from the moment I saw it. Now, I didn't pledge right away. I'm not a rich person, although I'm people like, oh, you're a visual effects artist, you must make a lot of money. Well, yeah, I make a lot of money when I'm working, and because my main talent is spaceships and that kind of stuff. Obviously, I don't get to work all that often. So if I'm not doing spaceships, I'm usually doing like environment modeling or a lot of lighting, but and post work, but generally not doing a ton of your day-to-day type shots. So I can do it. I'm never asked to do it because everyone always thinks of me, oh, it's the spaceship guy. But having multiple responsibilities, financial responsibilities, I didn't bid, jump right in while it was still the Kickstarter. I wish I had, but I didn't. However, I did finally bite the bullet when LTI was about to run out, and I so desperately wanted a Constellation. To me, that was like the ship that I wanted to experience the rest of the game, and I really didn't care about the rest of them. They build it as a Millennium Falcon, but it really is the Eagle from Space 1999 more than anything. And which is funny because the original Millennium Falcon design was also based on the same ship design. So, which eventually became the Rebel Blockade Runner. But also ironic, I co-built with a couple friends a Rebel Blockade Runner, which is actually what got me hired as a freelancer on the Battlestar Galactica miniseries. So, or the first episode probably now is what most people think of it. But, just a little bit of circular events there. But, so I mean that's when I bought in, and I've stayed current on development, and I play the latest build all the time, as you can probably see in the background. I'm recording this separately just because it's easier for me to record audio than sit there and play at the same time, and until they patch it, my HOTAS won't work. So that's why I pledged for Star Citizen, and hopefully anyone who watches this will see my career experiences as a valid point for my stances to not be so terribly worried about why this game isn't in any serious trouble yet. You always say yet because anything can and will go wrong, but until that actually happens, the sky is not falling. I'll at least say this: the main reason I say that Star Citizen development isn't in any serious danger yet is that there's something called the production triangle, and basically the gist of it is that you have three options when deciding how to spend your resources when developing a project. You can do something quickly, you can do something good or high quality, or you can do something that's expensive. Right, so it's good, fast, and cheap is essentially the goals, right? You have to pick two. You can't have everything, so you can have something that's done quickly, that's good, but it'll be dreadfully expensive, i.e. you have to hire an army's worth of people to do everything in a parallel process that gets things done as fast as humanly possible. So that's very expensive. Or you can do something good and you can do something cheap, but it's going to take a really long time to complete. So, etc., etc. So, you can do something fast and you can do something cheap, but the quality is not going to be there. It's going to be really bad looking. And that's the third option. And so, with an 80+ million budget, last I checked, and I can check right now, I think it was like 85 something, 86 something last I checked, but I don't check all that often. So it's probably close to 90 or more. So where are we looking at now? So $89,116,418 so far, Ray. And you go, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, especially for a crowdfunding game. But it's not that much money for a main studio game that has a big developer and whatnot. And so, it's probably right there, probably what the going average is for a high-level AAA game. And so, you also have to factor in that they're trying to do some stuff that has never been done before in its entirety of the scope of the game. And they're developing a lot of new systems. And so right there, what you have is you have quality and a fixed budget, because, you know, the budget's not going to get that much higher unless something really amazing happens. So, you know, we're probably looking maximum, you know, like $100 million to develop this game. And so the trade-off, of course, is time. So provided that they can work within their confined budget, achieve the quality that they're trying to achieve, the main thing that it's going to cost them is time. And so you just kind of have to be patient while a lot of this stuff is being developed, because these are the physical limitations of any production, whether you're doing games, you're doing movies, you're doing television shows. Doesn't matter. You know, you could be building a house. You know, it's all the same. When I say a production triangle, it just means that it's production of any kind. It could be a car, it could be whatever. And so the systems that they're trying to develop, because they take a lot of time, will be expensive. And the risk comes into is how long that budget will hold out. Now, you kind of have to take it on faith that their planning, their resource planning, is taking all that into account. And of course, they say it is. And until there's some sort of evidence to the contrary, you kind of have to take them at their word that they have that well enough in hand to see them through the end of the project. So, you know, all the worries and stuff like that some people have, I think, is probably misplaced, simply because most people don't understand production, and it's one of those things that's really weird if you're not familiar with it firsthand. You could be the biggest film and game aficionado in the world, but unless you actually have experience developing these kinds of projects, you really have no concept of what it takes to complete these things. Even if you think you do, even if you agree with everything I've said at this point, you really don't until you've lived through it. You know, I've worked jobs where I was working 18 hours a day for 3 months straight. I had 2 days off during that time, and I went home one day at like 7:30 p.m. really guilty because I had to drive another coworker to the airport early the next morning. And you know, I mean, that's the kind of weird things that you go through your mind when you're in production. It's like, I am so upset that I'm leaving before everyone else, where they're all going to be here till 2 a.m. and I'm leaving at 7:30. You know, I was too tired to go back. You know, I went home and went to bed. You know, it was just, you know, I took the sleep when I could get it. And I've worked several projects that were that strenuous, but that was the longest one. I worked on a model, just a single model for a pilot for 10 weeks, where in the beginning it was going well. And then the last 4 weeks of the model was me trying to rush to get it done because of a weirdness on the other side of the project that prevented me from doing my work on the schedule I had originally set, the pace I had originally set. So, you know, I was scrambling at the end, you know, barely sleeping. I was literally waking up on my drive to my normal day job, you know, waking up and realizing I'm in my car, I'm dressed, and my computer is in the back seat so I can set it up at work and continue to work on my freelance gig. You know, so, I mean, all sorts of crazy things like that happen in production. And so until you've lived through it, you just don't understand the sacrifice people make to bring you entertainment. And so, you know, anyone who's given the development a hard time needs to take that into account and understand the level of love and passion it takes to develop something like this and the sacrifice that's made. Yes, they're getting paid, but it goes beyond that. You can get paid to do whatever. You can get paid to do whatever for similar money. You know, they're obviously not the highest paying company out there because of the nature of their funding. So guaranteed these guys aren't getting top dollar. And so anyone worried about turnover, well, guess what? It's almost always having to do with money when it comes to passionate people leaving a production, especially in LA, because LA is so expensive to live in. The few times that I've lived there for work, is just so unbelievably expensive. I was paying over $1,000 for a studio apartment because it was less than a mile from work. And I wasn't always sure I'd be able to have a car. I did eventually get my car out there, but it took a few months. And so the last time I lived there, I didn't even send my car out. I just walked to work. You have to love it to do it, and you have to have a certain amount of fortitude. So just make sure you give those guys the respect due to them. If anyone looks kind of tired and worn out, it's not because they've been up all night partying. For the most part, occasionally does happen. It's because they pull long hours, very stressful hours, very focused hours, and the last thing they need is the people they're doing this for to give them any flack for their controller of choice isn't working perfectly, or whatever, what have you. So it is what it is, at least at this stage in development. It's still looking pretty good. For the most part, I'm fairly pleased, and I just want to see more. So I hope you all decide to come see more of this game with me. I should be starting some streaming soon and taking advantage of the new community hub that they released to hopefully draw attention to my channel, if nothing else, and hopefully will inspire more people to play the game, at least when it comes out, if not invest early. But without further ado, I'd just like to invite all of you to make sure you're subscribed to my channel. And if you enjoy this type of thing, please feel free to like that video so I know that you guys like what you're watching and not just watching the first 3 minutes, getting bored and turning off. So again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next episode. Bye.